I'm the GM Quinn, and today I have a very dumb video for you, but it's something that is close to my heart. Episode titles are very important, and they're an under-recognized art form. I found that an episode title that is really good elevates an episode for me, and one that's really bad does very much bring it down in my eyes. Today I'm going to be talking about my favorite show, or one of my favorite shows. I shouldn't diss Better Call Saul too quickly. Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, as I think there's a pretty wide variety in episode title quality throughout this entire series. This panic attack inducing collage down here is every single episode title in House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones. House of the Dragon is in red, Game of Thrones is in white, just for sake of ease. And today I'll be ranking them on a tier list. We have 5 tiers here. I thought that was about what I needed. At the bottom, Garbo, clear, obvious. Fine, I guess, is like, I mean, it's okay. I don't necessarily like it, but it gets the job done, I suppose. It's starting to get up there. It's just like standard episode title, good title, good title. It's not like the best of the best, but I do quite like it. And then just bars when the title is just fire. I am going to be ranking them based on these criteria right here. So what I'm measuring here are 1, how the episode title sounds in and of itself, the vibe it brings to the episode. 2, how well that title fits into the content of the episode. That's not going to be as major of a concern as the first one. I'm not ranking these episodes on how much I like the episode, which might mean that you'd see episodes from season 7 and 8 of Game of Thrones maybe a little higher than they would be otherwise, but they'd have to have good titles to get there. That said, there is still somewhat a factor. The title should not be completely unrelated to the subject matter that it is covering. So I think that is also quite important. 3 is how much I like the title, and 4, and most importantly, is whether it sucks. Speaking of titles sucking, I need to talk about this one because this is what inspired the video before I get into any of the other ones, because this title is the title of the most recent episode of House of the Dragon as of the time that I'm recording this, season 2's finale, and this is a garbage title. This is one of the worst titles I've heard in my entire life. Anytime I read it, I think it's a typo. Queen It Never Was would be pretty good. Rhaenys was an important character and it would make sense to talk about her death, but oh my god, I don't like this title. It inspired this video by way of me talking about it in a Glidus comment section. Shout out to him. So it's going squarely to the bottom of Garbo tier before we even get started. From here, I'm going to go through season by season and give my thoughts on each. Before I start my ranking, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. What's your favorite or least favorite episode title in Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon? While you're down there, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. It really helps both the video and my channel, and all of these things are free. Without further ado, let's rank. Game of Thrones Season 1 is perhaps the most consistent quality we've seen out of this universe maybe ever, so I think that it's interesting to examine whether the titles live up to that quality as well. I think you all should be able to guess my opinion on the title of the pilot, Winter is Coming, given that I have an entire series with that same title. I think that starting off with the pilot episode named after the house words of the main characters of the story, at least in the TV show, I think the books, it's more ambiguous as to who the main characters are, but the show is very focused on the Starks, and framing this episode around the idea that this summer, these good times that we're seeing is not going to last forever, I think it's a fantastic way to start a series. It also ties into the supernatural winter that we think the Starks might have named their words for and their castle for. Winterfell means winter died, according to Jace's translation in House of the Dragon Season 1 finale. But overall, Winter is Coming is a great title, and I think it works super duper well. It's one of my favorites in the series, and very much starts things off on a really good note. The King's Road is up next, and while I don't like it quite as much as Winter is Coming, I still think it's a pretty great title. Especially given that it is the second episode, I think that it's very consistent throughout, and I think that if we're looking at it as a title as applied to this episode specifically, I think it really works, given that a lot of our main players at this point are on the King's Road. We have Jon and Tyrion traveling north, we have Robert and Ned going south, and we have Catelyn at Winterfell, which is not necessarily the King's Road itself, but it is both parties' starting points as they travel on the King's Road. Daenerys is obviously disconnected from this theme, but she kind of has to be. Overall, I think it's a good title, and it does fit into the episode quite well, in addition to being fairly simple, and even just being about a road does emphasize that, hey, this is a fantasy series that's a bit more realistic. Our characters are going to be taking some time to actually travel to get where they're going. The first title that I really don't enjoy all that much is Lord Snow. it's good to have a little more focus on Jon in this episode, and it does play well for that. But overall, I'm not huge on titles that are essentially named after characters in general. It takes a lot for that to really live up to anything in my eyes, and I especially think that Lord Snow being the third episode of the series, they maybe kind of fired off a little too quickly there, insofar as I think that it could have been a lot better if this were, say, a season 5 episode where Jon was struggling with his command of the Night's Watch. I think that would make a lot more sense to be entitled Lord Snow rather than the third episode of the series where he just starts off at the Night's Watch. So I'm going to put it in fine. I don't think it's garbage by any means, but it's not good in my eyes. Cripples, Bastards, and Broken Things, I quite like. It's one of my favorite lines in both the first season and the first book. It speaks both to Tyrion's character quite well and to George R. R. Martin's character quite well, and I really enjoy it. I've done a video on how Martin does disability in his story, and I think that this chapter title, and not necessarily chapter title, episode title, chapter title tier list would be a different tier list, but Martin doesn't really title his chapters. I think it's quite good. I'm a fan. It's not bars, not quite. I don't think it's quite that tier, but it's very good. So let's see. Wolf and the Lion is up next. I haven't really talked about this much, but this is my favorite episode of Game of Thrones. With that said, it's kind of an average name. We get a lot of these as the series goes on. The blank and the blank, the wolf and the lion and the rose, the dragon and the wolf. And all of them, I think, are pretty just par for the course. I don't think they're really anything special. But with that said, I really don't mind it. I wouldn't think of anything else that would be a better title for it. So it's aight here. Golden Crown is going to go straight to bars, though, because I really like the multiple references with Ned figuring out the whole Sea to Strong thing and Viserys getting his crown and just the weight of the crown on Robert. I really enjoy it, and I think that it is one of the best chapter titles. And I keep saying chapter titles. I'm too used to talking about the books. Episode titles in the first season. You win or you die. It's such an iconic quote. It's such an iconic quote. I can't decide if it's a good title or bars. I think I'm hesitant to put too many things in bars right off the jump, but I think you win or you die kind of earns its place there. It's, I think, probably the most iconic line of the first season, and you just really couldn't come up with an episode name better than that. I think it's just fantastic. Pointy End, I'm going to put in aight as well. I like the kind of way it's showing, like, the pointy end is the part of the sword you're stabbing with. Jon gave Arya that lesson very early on, and we now see that we've kind of come to the pointy end of Ned's plan as everyone is dying and there are a lot of bad things happening to the Starks. I quite like it, and it does earn points for both being written by George Martin and essentially being Arya's first kill, I believe, is in this episode, which ties into the pointy end and that lesson for her, which I do quite like, but overall, it's nothing super duper special. We've got, 2 more left? Baelor, I'm going to put in good title. It focuses on this kind of idea of forgiveness, and it is worth noting that the Sept of Baelor is this super holy site where one of our main characters ends up getting his head chopped off. That really isn't brought much attention to in later seasons of the show, but I think that if they had stuck to the book, this would be an even better chapter title, probably bars, given that the High Sparrow in the books has a lot of issues about Ned being executed before the Sept of Baelor, essentially bespoiling this holy ground. I think it's quite good, and I think it's some of the best this season has to offer, and it also references a really good change that even Martin has noted, which is Ned giving Jory the word Baelor, essentially to look for Arya there and be able to save his daughter and take her to the Night's Watch, rather than him just Yoren, not Jory. I'm getting my northern characters mixed up. Rather than essentially just having him find her by happenstance in the next book. Fire and Blood is also going to go in good title. I quite like it, and it is going to start off a list. I'm gonna put it in green to symbolize this list. It is a title that House of the Dragon is jealous it didn't get to first, because that would be a really good House of the Dragon episode. As it stands, I love the way it draws the focus to Daenerys in a way that the first season really hadn't as of yet. So I think that it is quite a good way to cap off the first season of Game of Thrones. Overall, very high average for season 1 of Game of Thrones. I'm pretty impressed with the episode titles. It's season 2 time. I think that these have kind of a common problem, at least that I noticed when I was entering them all and typing them all in the like hour it took me to type all of these in. But I think that we'll see that problem crop up as we go. I won't spoil it too early. But speaking of spoiling things too early, The North Remembers is a banger title. I think it's going in bars, but I wish they had like actually saved it and used it for the Davos speech in A Dance with Dragons. I think that using it this early is good. It kind of cements the Northern motivation for why they're taking up arms against the Lannisters, but it's just kind of It's not the greatest. With that said, the Nightlands is another one that's very evocative, despite, as far as I recall, not being that evocative of an episode. This refers to, I believe, some of the areas that Daenerys is traveling through at this point, so it's not necessarily the most related to all of the story, but given that it is kind of going into Stannis' early days in the series as well, I think the Nightlands can also tie into like Melisandre and the darkness she's foretelling for the future of the realms of man. I'm gonna say it's good title. I like it, at least. So yeah, we'll fit it in there. I'm glad that these are generally positive. I think that they might decrease as we go along, but we shall see. Going straight up to bars again, What is Dead May Never Die is just, oh my goodness. I love it. I just love these words generally. I think that it could be written on anything, and I would probably buy it. I have to say the Greyjoy words are also pretty great. We do not sow. I wish we'd gotten that as an episode title. Maybe if we'd gotten like a proper Kingsmoot scene, but alas, we can only hope. Garden of Bones. I forgot about that. Now that I'm saying it out loud, it's a lot cooler than I remembered. I think it's kind of Nightlands tier, though, in that, like, it's pretty evocative. It's a cool title, but it's not, like, the coolest title. I feel like there could be better ones coming along here, so we'll slot this one in here. I'm being very nice. The Ghost of Harrenhal is interesting. I feel like this is gonna... I'm making this one green as well, because I feel like House of the Dragon could have used this with one of the episodes in Season 2. I'm gonna put it in pretty I think that A Ghost in Winterfell is what I'm thinking of, that Theon chapter from A Dance with Dragons, and I like that chapter a lot, and I think that it works better there than it does here, and I feel like it doesn't really communicate what it needs to quite as well as you maybe would want it to. I feel like The Ghost in Harrenhal is something that Arya thinks of herself in the books, but I don't think she refers to herself as such out loud in either the books or the show, so we're just kind of left wondering, what is the Ghost of Harrenhal? What is that? It's The Old Gods and the New. Oh, that's a pretty good one, too. I'm putting too many in bars. I don't know. The Old Gods and the New. I like The Old Gods and the New because they do focus a lot on, like, divinity, and this is the one where the High Septon gets torn apart in the mob, I believe. That was a fun detail, that The Old Gods and the New and Season 2, Episode 6 of House of the Dragon ended up both having these peasant riots happen. But yeah, I'm gonna put it... I think it's a good title. I don't think it's quite bars tier. A Man Without Honor, however, bars tier. It is just so good in that, like, it fits so many characters. It's just so core to the ideas of the series as a whole. I just love it overall. I think that honor is such a core concept to A Song of Ice and Fire, and the lack thereof, or the perception of the lack thereof, is such a concrete idea, and how much of the foundation of so many of these characters, like Theon and Jaime, both of which who are kind of at the fore of this episode. Season 2 doesn't do a ton with Jaime, but what they do here I quite enjoy. I think I might have gone a little out of order to fit them in here at certain points, because I think I'm realizing I might have done that here, but yeah, Prince of Winterfell I'm also going to put in a good title tier. Actually, I really like the Prince of Winterfell as a title. I think it's going to go here because it's very focused on Theon and Bran, if I recall, and I think that the two of them both kind of having claim to that title is really good, and I think it does a lot with, like, the actual drama of what's going on at Winterfell, which is a good way to tie into the episode overall. Blackwater. It's simple, it's effective, it's perfect, you don't need anything else. Battle of the Blackwater, if it was the Battle of the Blackwater, that would just be kind of too wordy. There's another case that I'm going to disagree with that with later on in this video. I'm sure you can guess what it is, but Valar Morghulis as a title, all men must die is what this means, and I'm going to put it in fine, I guess, because I don't think it really works all that well as just kind of signpost for the episode, because there really isn't much to do with it other than like Arya getting the coin. I think that might have been a better season finale title for like season 4, given that we see Arya like actually leaving Westeros at that point, and I don't think The Children is a very good title, as I'm sure you'll see. But yeah, no, that's season 2. Oh, the problem was being too wordy, which apparently isn't that big of a deal for me. But yeah, overall, still high average. I think, honestly, looks like almost exactly the same average as season 1. But that'll change, I promise. Despite season 3 being debatably the best season of the show, its titles kind of start off on a bit of a downer here. I feel much the same as I do with Valar Morghulis for Valar Dohaeris. I know I'm very much butchering those pronunciations. I'm sorry, I'm bad at fictional pronunciations. But yeah, I don't know, this doesn't really have much to do with men serving, and I feel like the average viewer will just think this is kind of gibberish, which, not great for a title, but it's followed up by what I always think is a banger title, that being Dark Wings, Dark Words. It's just such a fun phrase, and I honestly wish it was said more in both the series and in the books. Walk of Punishment, I don't really think it sounds that great, and it also doesn't have a ton to do with the episode as a whole. This is the one where Jaime loses his hand, so that can be seen as sort of a punishment, but it just doesn't really, I don't know, I don't vibe with it as much as I do. And Now I'm blazing through these season 3. Let's see. So I think And Now His Watch Has Ended is a good title. If I recall, this is the episode where Jeor Mormont dies. Which does make sense. It's good to have that there. So I think that overall it's important to focus on that, given that he is a very important character. And that is a very cool phrase, and now his watch is ended. But I feel like that might have been a better title for like season 6, episode 1, after Jon has been killed or something. I feel like it's another one where they kind of shot it out too early. Kissed by Fire is going straight into bars. Oh my god. This episode is incredible, and I love the way it works on multiple levels, given that we have Jaime's story about fire in essentially him saving King's Landing from wildfire, and then we have Ygritte and Jon, given that she is kissed by fire, which is how the wildlings say she's a redhead. It's just a really good title, and oh my god, I just love saying and reading that, kissed by fire. That's so cool. The climb's kind of lame. I hate to say it. The connection between climbing the wall and Littlefinger is pretty neat. I'm a fan of that. But as a title, it's just kind of lame. The Bear and the Maiden Fair, though, I like it as a song. It's been sufficiently established at this point as a song, given that it ends Walk of Punishment, I believe. So I like it. I'm not sure that I love it. I'm going to put it in good title, I think, because I do love the focus on, like, music in fantasy stories. I love, like, The Hobbit for that reason, because there are so many fun songs, and I wish that the adaptations had really picked up on those things more. I feel like Game of Thrones did a decent job with that, but I feel like it failed in a lot of things, adapting music. Not necessarily the music itself. I think that everything that Ramon Jawani puts out is just incredible, but I feel like at least with the adaptation of Mance, they really lost out on a lot of really good singing, at least as far as I'm aware. Continuing along here, Breaker of Chains. Is Breaker of Chains season 3? I think it is. I think I just put it in the wrong spot. I think Second Sons is 2. So we'll get those out here, and then we'll get the next 2. Breaker of Chains, I'm going to put here. It's neat. It ties into Daenerys' new identity as someone who's going to be liberating people from slavery, but I don't really think it's that fantastic of a title. I think that it works well as a part of her title, but as an episode title on its own, not the greatest. Second Sons is getting the green treatment because House of the Dragon talks a lot about Second Sons, and I bet it kind of wishes that it could name an episode this, but it can't. With that said, I think as it stands, it's just kind of all right. It's obviously being named after the Second Sons sellsword company, but just as a name, actually, do I like it? Should it be up a tier? I think it'll be up a tier because I quite I quite like how much this refers to, and I think that Second Sons is a very good name for a sellsword company. It makes sense that Lord's second son would just go off and fight in order to kind of make his own way in the world, given that he won't inherit anything, unlike his older brother. The Reigns of Castamere is going right up here. I think it's just such an iconic title for such an iconic episode. It hadn't occurred to me how hard it would be to name the Red Wedding episode, but I think the Reigns of Castamere is such a perfect compromise, because you're not giving it away. This isn't like called The Red Wedding or Edmure Tully marries Rosalind Frey. It's a reference to the song that is the tip-off as to what this wedding is. And it's great because this song is established earlier on in the season as well, and it is just so instantly iconic. Garbo tier, though, I'm going to put Misa down here, unfortunately. Sorry, I don't like titles that specifically refer to a single character. See Lord Snow. And I think that Misa, in addition to later being mistranslated and probably creating some confusion there, I think it's just not the strongest insofar as, like, Daenerys isn't a massive part of this episode. If I recall, she has, like, one scene, and that is Marine essentially being given to her, and then all the slaves come out and whatnot. I don't think that's really that big of a reference. I feel like Misa means mother in Old Giscari, right? I feel like it should be a deeper meaning there. I feel like there should be more characters that are focused on, or motherhood as a concept should be focused on more. I feel like Cersei could have tied into it more, or Catelyn if she was still alive. Honestly, I think that if Stoneheart came back in this episode, Misa being mother in this very old and kind of scary language would be great. I think that would very much symbolize her return and this essentially massive amount of wrong that has been done to her as a mother, who has now seemingly had all of her children ripped from her. Season 4 was for a time my favorite season of Game of Thrones, and it's off to a rough start because I don't think Two Swords is a very strong episode title at all. I think it's just kind of boring. I get what they're going for, the Two Swords being Widow's Wail and Oathkeeper being reforged from ice, and I do like the way it ties into the cold open there, but it just could have been better, I feel like. That said, The Lion and the Rose is a little better, and it falls into the pretty alright tier that I also had previously mentioned for The Wolf and the Lion. I feel like all of these titles are, like, they're fine. Like, it's not anything special when you get The House Sigil and The House Sigil, but it's not, like, bad. I don't dislike it. I think I'd rank it above everything in these tiers, which are either just kind of boring or don't really fit. Oathkeeper, Brandon Sanderson's seething right now. I do really enjoy his books. I'm kidding on that. I do need to finish Oathbringer, which is one of the titles of the books, but given that that is the name of a sword in that series, I can tell he probably really wishes he got to the name Oathkeeper for a sword first, because it is just a really cool name. It's going to go in good title. I like it quite a bit, and I think that it does fit very well with the focus on Brienne's vow and how she's going to not only take the sword, but continue to uphold it as she goes forward. First of His Name is also pretty good. I believe this is one with Tommen's crowning. It's nothing super special, but it makes another one better that we'll get to in some time. It'll be a minute away, so we'll get to that in a little bit, and I'll discuss it then. But let's see what else we got for Season 4. We do have a banger right here. The Laws of Gods and Men. I'm biased as a law student, but man, what a title. I love it. I love that it's so focused on Tyrion's trial, and it does focus, like, the laws of gods and men. It not only focuses on laws of men, which is Tyrion currently being tried by his father, but the Almighty Father as well, because that is kind of who Tywin is supposed to be taking the aspect of. I realize in saying that I sound like I'm talking about, like, Christianity. I'm not. I'm talking about the faith of the Seven in Westeros. But yeah, no, I really enjoy it, and I think that overall it's great because I think that it also ties in the laws of the gods insofar as this idea of kinslaying being the most immoral thing that one can do. That idea is very lost in translation between the books and the show. It is viewed in the books that all kinslayers are accursed, and I feel like the only instance of that really being mentioned or referenced in the show is Rickard Karstark's death, where he curses Robb as a kinslayer, which is a great scene, but I do wish they'd focused on that more, especially like Jaime killing his cousin or Ramsay killing Roose in a later season. I feel like they really didn't do enough with that. Mockingbird, this is not the Hunger Games, unfortunately. It's it's not is it a bad title? What do I think of Mockingbird? I feel like it's not a great title. I also have issues with the pacing of it, kind of, insofar as I feel like they didn't really time-lace his death the best. I feel like it should have been at the end of the season. I might be a little biased because I did just finish a Storm of Swords reread, and I love that entire book ends with the reveal that Peter and Lysa were the ones who killed John Arryn, and then her death, and then Peter framing Marillion for it. So that's getting into how much I like the episode, though. I need to not do that. I need to be focused on the titles. I still don't think it's a very good title. Mockingbird is just kind of generic. The Mountain and the Viper was my favorite episode for a long time. I think still have my favorite scene. I love the titular fight, but yeah, it's instantly iconic and just a great episode title. It's going right up here. It's bars. It's bars. We all know it. I can't really dispute that. You can't dispute it. It's just the case. But speaking of not bars, we've got The Children, who I had to slightly angle to fit it in there. The Children is not a good episode title. I guess it's kind of referring to, the Children of the Forest. We see Leaf for the first time this episode. Oh, that's so cool. It's not. The Children really doesn't make any sense, and it's just such a generic episode title that I really don't like. I think it's kind of lazy, and especially given the fact that this is such a momentous episode. It could have been something to do with Tyrion or Tywin's story, given that Tyrion kills Tywin in this episode. I think that there's just so much other stuff going on, especially like Stannis getting to the wall and stuff. Oh my god. There's just a ton happening, and The Children pertains to almost none of it. So I really don't like this chapter title, episode title. I need to brand that into my forehead. Okay. But overall, this was a lower average for a season. I think we're starting to see the tier list even out a little bit. I'm glad to see that there are more episode titles that I like than I dislike, but we'll see if that trend continues in season 5. I missed one from season 4 that I'm going to do before I talk about season 5, and that's The Watchers on the Wall, which is also a banger. It is essentially a portion of the Night's Watch vows, but even outside of that, it just sounds great. They are the Watchers on the Wall. And it also brings to mind, I think, in my opinion, the best scene of that episode, which is Gren reciting those vows in the tunnel where he's about to face down Mag the Mighty. I wish he'd been Donald Noy, but regardless, it's just such a good title. With that said, we do have some season 5 here that are in a weird order because I couldn't fit them well. The Wars to Come is pretty good. I'm not massive on its framing and use in the episode, but it's okay. I'll put it in pretty alright. The Wars to Come is a fun phrase. I think I've used it in D&D a time or two, when being an NPC or something. But outside of that, House of Black and White is going in fine, I guess. It's a place that Arya goes. I mean, it's a place with a pretty cool name, but as an episode name, it's just kind of meh. I'm not the biggest fan. I'm not opposed to it, but I mean, I guess it's fine. Sons of the Harpy, I think I'm probably out of order by this point. It's going off the rails, but it's all good. Sons of the Harpy, I'd also say is pretty alright. It's just the name of an organization. You can kind of tell they're maybe getting a little more lazy with the episode titles at this point. Actually, you know what? This is going to go in fine, I guess, because it's just kind of, I don't know, it's lazy and kind of lame, and I feel like they could have put so much more effort into this, even though it's something that really doesn't require all that much effort. Unbowed, Unbrent, Unbroken is a pretty difficult one in that I like the Martell words. I like them a lot, but also this episode. And I hate the way this title fits into this episode because, I don't know, this is an episode. I'm not going to get into what happens in this episode. This episode is very bad for a number of reasons, but I think that it's just, I don't like the way this title's used. In addition to not liking the Dorne story in the show, I think that it just doesn't really fit, and I think that I don't know, they were trying to be clever with fitting it into Sansa's wedding. Aha, that's such a clever move we're doing. It's not, and it's just bad. I'm dropping it down further. I don't care. I like the Martell words. I like the Martells, but Kill the Boy, though. We've got a banger on our hands. Anything referencing Jon 2 at Dance with Dragons has my full and utter support. I think that Kill the Boy is a great title. It also references the best line in this episode, which is from Maester Aemon. And yeah, it's just a fantastic line. I don't know why he said that Jon should kill Ollie, but that is beyond me. The Gift goes down in Poo Poo Garbo tier. It's not good. I don't like it. It's lazy. The Gift. What does that have to do with anything? Oh my god. Okay. I'm not going to talk about that one anymore, or I will get angry because it's lame and lazy. And okay, Hard Home is an interesting one, and hear me out on why it's interesting, and don't pay attention to the fact that I keep accidentally moving the tiers. Hard Home is a good episode name. I like it. It sounds cool. It's the place where this big battle happens. It makes sense. I like it. I'm going to put it in good title tier. With that said, it starts a very dangerous trend that churns out some really god-awful titles. They get into a trend in later seasons, which we will see as we go through them, of just naming episodes after tangentially related places. This episode, it works. This episode is very focused on Hard Home. It's great. Hard Home is such a momentous location that even Martin wanted to get to in the books but couldn't, and it makes sense that they'd want to name it after this. But, oh my god, it's just... It's a bad trend that Hard Home started. And I think that starting that trend is why it's not going up in Bars tier. Garbo tier, though, is getting a new edition with The Dance of Dragons, which I'm going to put it in green because I don't think that House of the Dragon is going to do anything resembling it because it's too similar to The War. But this title is so bad on so many different levels, I don't even have time to discuss it. Okay, I maybe have time to discuss it. This is the point of this video. So, The Dance of Dragons is just so bad. The fifth book in the series is A Dance with Dragons. The War is The Dance of the Dragons. For some reason, D&D combined those two in the most awkward way possible. The Dance of Dragons. But it also has nothing to do with dragons, necessarily. Like, there's, like, a scene with Drogon, sure, but, like, Dance of Dragons. I have problems with A Dance with Dragons being named that to begin with. At least that sounds nice. The Dance of Dragons is just called that because Shireen references the dance in her little scene with Stannis before getting barbecued. And I don't know. I think this might be my least favorite episode name in the series, but I reserve judgment on that until we get to the later ones. I think we got one more here from season 5, and that is Mother's Mercy. It's kind of tying into Misa here. It's like kind of Misa, but a little better. I put it in pretty alright. I think that it's good to tie into like Cersei's Walk of Atonement, which very much makes sense, given that she's asking for the mercy of the Mother, one of the 7 faces of the gods in A Song of Ice and Fire. So overall, I think that it does make sense, but it's not the best. Good news, everyone. We're now on the best season of Game of Thrones, according to everyone. So this season has its highs and lows, mostly lows in terms of writing. There are some decent episode titles sprinkled throughout, and we're gonna discuss them. The Red Woman is not one of them. I think this would have been much better if it was, and now his watch has ended. But I'm gonna put the Red Woman in fine, I guess. I feel like there is an element of this episode that is focused on Melisandre and her abilities, but I don't think it's really enough to carry the episode, and I've said in the past, I don't like episodes named after people, and Melisandre appears to be a person, though she does appear very old in this episode. Home. Garbage. What? Why is it just home? Like, what the hell? Like, I genuinely don't understand why it's just home. Like, I guess Bran is in this and he sees Winterfell in his visions or whatever, but it's just lame. I don't know. I don't like it. Oathbreaker's a little better. First good title from season 6. I like that it parallels Oathkeeper, and I feel like it could have been kind of driven in more in the actual texts of the episode itself, but I'll put it up here with Oathkeeper. I think that it's quite good. I'm a fan. Book of the Stranger, I like. It's a pretty good title, actually. Is that Bars? It might be Bars, honestly. I didn't expect it to be, but Book of the Stranger. Yeah, that's Bars. Okay, I hate to say it because I don't think I like this episode very much, but Book of the Stranger being a part of the religious text, and I assume a less talked about one because the Stranger isn't really talked about much. I'm a fan of it. It's got this kind of darker atmosphere to it. It's very, very edgy. The Door. Oh, fun. Actually, it's iconic in a way, given what happens in this episode and how much everybody freaked out about it when it was initially airing. So it's going to be bumped up from Garbo into fine, I guess, because the door element is iconic, and I think that you really couldn't name it anything else without really giving away what was going on. Blood of My Blood. I just don't, I don't know. I feel like this has potential to be bars, but I just don't like it all that much. It's a Dothraki saying, and I also don't like the Dothraki stuff going on because it just doesn't make a ton of sense at this point in the story. But yeah, I'm gonna say Blood of My Blood is kind of garbo, and I'm just not a fan. Is it garbo? Is it fine? I think maybe it's fine. It's fine. I'm being too mean to season 6 because I don't like season 6. The Broken Man makes me angry because I wish we had that speech in the show, but it is quite a good title. I'll put it up here because it's pretty good, and it does fit into a lot of different characters that are kind of happening in this episode. And yeah, it rolls off the tongue. Someone should write an excellent speech in a book called A Feast for Crows about broken men, but I don't know. It doesn't seem like anyone ever will. No one. Number of people who like this episode title. It's just kind of lame. I get that Arya's training is becoming no one and everything, but like, yeah, so like, it's just not that cool of a name, and it's not very, I don't know. Some of the more simple names are the ones I like least. I think it takes a lot for a simple name to be like great in my eyes, but overall, yeah, I feel like they really could have done better. I'm adjusting the spacing on this because it's bothering me. Haha. Now it's all fixed. I've done everything right. My OCD can rest at ease. Battle of the Bastards. Controversial episode that some people like, some people don't like. I am more in the don't like part of it. I think it's very pretty to look at. But with that said, I hope you can't hear the motorcycle that is passing my house. I think it's a banger. I think it's just a fantastic episode title. Battle of the Bastards is instantly iconic. Mostly because both of these characters have been so established as bastards, and I don't know, the alliteration just gets me. I've always had a theory about the title The Winds of Winter on Season 6, Episode 10. I think that this was like the last nail in the coffin for the relationship between D&D and George R.R. Martin, given that it clearly deteriorated around Season 5, where he stopped writing an episode per season, and now with this, it just seems kind of insulting. Like, we know that the show is surpassing the books at this point, but it seems like David and Dan are trying to show, oh, we're giving you what Martin won't give you. Like, it's obviously a good title, but I don't know, I just don't like their use of it because it feels just kind of like they're being pricks about it. With that said, that is way too long of a thing. It's a good title. I'm putting it in good title tier because of that. But yeah, I like it as a title. I think it maybe doesn't make a ton of sense given what's going to actually happen in the Winds of Winter. But yeah, because I mean a lot of what happens is also kind of a Dance with Dragons-y. So yeah, it's okay. It could have been better, but we'll see. Season 7 is a weird one. It's got some of my favorite and least favorite episode title. Off the bat, Dragonstone, Stormborn. The first 2 episodes of Season 7 just go right to the bottom immediately. They are really lame and really don't say anything about the episodes that they are naming. I don't know, it doesn't make sense. Dragonstone does not appear in Dragonstone until the very last scene with no dialogue. I get that like Daenerys getting back to Dragonstone is a big deal, but like, I mean, if an episode was going to be called Dragonstone, I feel like Stannis' introduction might have been a better one. But Stormborn as well, like, I don't really see what Daenerys being a Stormborn has to do with anything that goes on in this episode. It tells us next to nothing other than, I think, a story that is told in this episode. Overall, both of those are just pretty lame. With that said, The Queen's Justice is a very good title. I think it sounds very good, and it does make sense given the contents of the episode, as I think that it ties into Cersei and Daenerys and Olenna in a very good way, given that Olenna dies in this episode, which is very sad, given that she is a character that I think is improved from the show to the books, or vice versa, from the books to the show. That said, I think that improvement is mostly just due to having more screen time in the show than she does in the book. Looking around a little bit more here, we have The Spoils of War, I believe, is up next, and that's going to go pretty high. The Spoils of War is just a banger title. I like it. It sounds really good. It's not the best episode, and I feel like the titular Spoils of War don't really have anything to do with anything. I guess the Spoils of War are the money that they got from Highgarden that they're shipping back to King's Landing that causes the battle, but I guess it's enough of a tie to warrant it being in Bars tier. Eastwatch, Beyond the Wall. Look at these fascinating chapter titles that tell us so much about the world and the episode and what's going on. Like, Eastwatch, sure, we've never been there before. Let's name an episode with one scene there, Eastwatch. It makes no sense, and it makes me very angry, and it's just like, they're so clearly phoning in so much of these latter seasons, they don't need to phone in the episode titles too. Like, come on, it's just kind of ridiculous. It's just like the least amount of effort. And Beyond the Wall, we've been Beyond the Wall so many times in the series past, and none of those have been named Beyond the Wall. It's just, I don't know, dumb, and I hate it. The Dragon and the Wolf, ooh, unprecedented. We've never seen a title like this before. I'm sorry I'm being so mean to Season 7. I don't like Season 7, but the titles are an underrated bad element of this season, and honestly of a latter Game of Thrones. With that said, maybe Season 8 will have some that are maybe a little better. I'm doubtful, but we'll see. We're on Season 8, and we've already got a stinker just to start. Winterfell, let's name it after a place. This is at least a modicum more excusable because, like, the entire episode almost takes place in Winterfell, but it's still just boring, and it's just a place. Why are you just naming episodes places? Oh my god, the season finale is not going to be called King's Landing. It's just, I don't know. If any episode was going to be King's Landing, it should be Season 6, Episode 10. Beyond that, I think A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is a banger. I think it's a good episode title. They're naming a series after this episode, so it kind of has to be a banger. And it very much fits into this kind of theming of Brienne as Duncan the Tall's successor. I love her knighting ceremony. It's just, it's great all around. The Long Night, as much as I hate this episode, and as bad as this episode is, it's an aight episode title. It's fine. That's what they're doing. It should have been longer. It should have been better lit. It should have been a lot of things. But, I mean, that episode title should house a much better episode than they decided to put in it, which is quite sad. The Last of the Starks sounds good. I like the way the title sounds. And for that, it's getting a pretty I tier. With that said, it is also deducted a little bit. It'd probably be a good title if there were fewer Starks left, or if a Stark had died since the Season 5 finale. Rickon dies in Season 6, Episode 9. Great, The Last of the Starks. The reason this episode is called The Last of the Starks is because the showrunners, the producers, the marketing whoever's were trying to metagame this season. They were like, oh, we have the Long Night here. They're going to think that the war with the others is just beginning. And now, the episode after, The Last of the Starks, the only ones who survived this epic conflict. Oh no, there are so few surviving. It's so deadly. Yeah. Whereas, Jorah, Theon, Beric die in the Long Night. Dolorous Ed. This is angrier than I usually get in videos, and I apologize for that. But The Bells is also pretty lame. It is saved from Garbo because I think it's going to be a lot cooler in the books, and it's going to relate to a character who I really like. But I'm not going to mention this video in the books, so you're welcome for that. But I think The Bells is just kind of lame and generic. And yeah, speaking of lame and generic, the Iron Throne, it can go in fine, I guess. It's not actively bad like all the fucking location titles, but it's still pretty bad. It's very generic. I get that, the Iron Throne gets incinerated at the end. It's such a big moment of symbolism. It's so cool. There's no more Iron Throne, even though we're still having kings who are serving for life, appointed by a council of nobility who can probably just turn back into typical monarchy. It's just, oh my god. They just got so lazy with a lot of these. A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is good. The Last of the Starks sounds pretty good, but outside of that, these late game chapter titles are really not the best, but I could use a breath of fresh air with a brand new series. Time to talk about House of the Dragon, a series that I think is much better at naming its episodes as compared to later Game of Thrones. With that said, the Bars tier is still a lot more crowded than I thought it would be, because there are a lot of really goddamn good episode titles. Heirs of the Dragon is the first episode of House of the Dragon, and in terms of a pilot name, it's not quite as good as Winter's Coming, but I do still think it's a pretty good episode name. I'm going to put it in pretty alright, because I think that, Yeah, the Heirs of the Dragon is actually the main conflict, figuring out who these successors that Targaryen dynasty is going to be, but it's also pretty generic sounding. I don't know, Heirs of the Dragon sounds like it could come from like any old fantasy show or whatever. I feel like it could be better. The Rogue Prince, however, what a daring name. I can't do the guitar riff with my mouth, but I would if I could. It's a very good name, and I like that both the Rogue Prince, the Rogue Prince, and the Princess and the Queen are represented here, as those are the two short stories on which Fire and Blood was based, at least for this era. So it is good to see, and I'm a fan of it. Second of his name is, I think, a banger. I said first of his name, I forget where it is. It's right here. First of his name was setting something else up. I think that first of his name being a Game of Thrones episode title makes second of his name even better. They don't have second sons, but I think that the second of his name very ties into that syndrome, the like being second best thing. And I think that framing it around Aegon the Second's birthday as well is just kind of a fun idea. And yeah, it's a really good episode title. I'm not just biased because this was the first episode I ever covered on YouTube. So yeah, it has a little special place in my heart, but I do also really like the title. King of the Narrow Sea, George Martin is back at it again with his euphemism names, but I think King of the Narrow Sea is pretty good. I'm going to put it in pretty alright, because I think it's good, not great. Yeah, it's decent. King of the Narrow Sea. It's on the wordier side on the letter end, and I feel like the Narrow Sea isn't that evocative, so it's okay. It's not good, it's not bad, it just is. We Light the Way, however, I think first use of we in a chapter title, or even first person, but yeah, I really like this title. It's obviously just the Hightower words, but tying it into Alicent and her dress and this guidance she's receiving from Otto that she's now finally internalized, it's just a really great title that I really, really enjoy. The Princess and the Queen, speaking of good titles that I really enjoy, I'm going to put it right with the Rogue Prince, because I think they're pretty much doing exactly the same thing. I do think that's probably the weakest episode of Season 1. I think it kind of stumbles with some of the time skip elements, but at least it has a very good title and does a good job of showing the now separation between these once very close friends in Queen Alicent Hightower and Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen. It's a very good episode overall. Not my favorite in Season 1, and my least favorite in Season 1, but it's still better than a lot of the other episodes, and it's named quite well. Okay, Driftmark, location name, only time they do this in House of the Dragon. I don't hate it as much as I hate the Game of Thrones place names. I'm putting it in fine, I guess, not Garbo, because I think that Driftmark is more excusable as a name because of how it's worked into the episode itself. Not only is it a cool sounding name, but I feel like Driftmark being the sole location, this being essentially a bottle episode at Driftmark, makes it work a lot better, especially given that we've only seen this castle like once briefly in episode 5 before. So it's marginally better than the place names from season 7 and 8, but not by much. What else we got? Lord of the Tides. The Lord of the Tides. I feel like if it was just Lord of the Tides, it'd be higher, but it's going to go here. Actually, Lord of the Tides is just such a cool title that Martin invented, and I think it's worth being a very good episode title as well. I think it ties in well, and I think that it just has this good point of reference for this succession crisis worsening, and not just for the title of Lord of the Tides, but then for the Iron Throne as kind of an extension of that. Additionally, going on from there, we have the Green Council and the Black Queen, both of which I'm going to put in good title. I think they're both quite good. I think that they're not the greatest. The Green Council I like slightly more than the Black Queen. And it is weird. It's worth noting that all of these titles came out before the season came out, and I was surprised by that, given the fact that I assumed that Season 1 House of the Dragon was going to end with Viserys I's death. I was surprised to see they were going further. I do wish that the Green Council had been a little better, but with that said, I think they kind of responded to that, having all the episode names out beforehand in kind of the worst way possible, because with almost all of these episodes from Season 2 that I'm about to talk about, the titles weren't released beforehand. They just didn't release. They were on HBO Max as, Episode 4, Episode 5, until like an hour after each episode, which I really didn't like. I like having an episode title beforehand to be able to not only speculate, but kind of set my frame of mind for what I'm going to see in this episode. Time for another shorter season. You already know my thoughts on The Queen Who Ever Was, i.e. the worst title on this entire list, but I'm going to talk about the other episodes of this season. A Son for a Son, bars. It's a really good line from Fire and Blood, and I think it's really well utilized. I think that there are issues with blood and cheese, as people brought up, but none of that comes from the phrase "a son for a son." And I like that they kind of worked that into the episode a little bit more, with it being a main focus of Blood and Cheese's actual kind of thoughts and motivations there. In that a son is a son, and they only want a son. They didn't want to kill Helena. They were just going strictly on Daemon's orders. Going from there, Rhaenyra the Cruel is my favorite episode of House of the Dragon, but in terms of being a title, it's okay. I like the way it references the propaganda campaign against the Blacks by Otto Hightower, but outside of that, it really just doesn't reference that much of the rest of the episode, and yeah, it just doesn't sound that great, and I feel like there could have been a better episode title for Season 2, Episode 2, but I get it. It's a very broad episode where a lot of shit happens, so I could see just going for a more general name and naming it after a person, the Queen. The Burning Mill is going into bars, honestly. It was not always this way for me, but I don't know. The Burning Mill, in addition to being a cool battle name and place name, Alt-Shift-X kind of sold me on this one, because in his recap video for this episode, he talks about all of the circle imagery going on here, and like a mill, it continues to turn around, and that kind of ties into the cycles of violence that Martin so often talks about, especially in like A Feast for Crows, and that just completely and totally sold me on this episode title. It's so cool, and I love it. Speaking of episode titles that are so cool and I love, The Red Dragon and the Gold is my favorite chapter title from Fire and Blood. It's just so good, and what a goddamn good title. Oh my god. The Red Dragon and the Gold. It's interesting to see that those are the dragons are being referred to, because like the Red Dragon and the Gold, it's referencing the sigils and also the Battle at Rook's Rest as well. So it's interesting to see the kind of multiple levels on which this title works, and it just sounds great. However, unfortunately, after the Red Dragon and the Gold, whoever was writing episode titles must have gotten fired. Because we have The Queen Who Ever Was, which is the worst episode title in the series. We also have Regent, and we also have Small Folk. Those are the most generic episode titles I've ever heard. These episodes are ranging from pretty good to fine, but the episode titles really wouldn't tell you that, because like, I don't know, they just gave us nothing there. Oh my god, like Regent, Small Folk, cool. I don't know. I think personally, Regent Season 2 Episode 5 is my least favorite episode of House of the Dragon so far, because I feel like nothing happens, but I do think that that's not necessarily painting how I feel about this title, because it's a shitty title in and of itself. The last tier is The Red Sewing. I was worried they wouldn't use this title. It's such a cool title, and I thought that they might steer clear of it, because they already had a Season 2 episode entitled The Red Something. I think that The Red Sewing is just such a fantastic title. It is going right up to bars. I think it's just so good, and it was also a really good episode, so I think it very much works hand in hand with that. Season 2 was interesting. It had some of both the best and the worst episode titles in the series, for my money, which is interesting, because I don't really think there's a season of Game of Thrones that really fell into that bucket. So, this is the final tier list. What do you think? I'd love to hear your opinions in the comments down below. While you're down there, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy. I'd really appreciate any support. Leaving a comment and subscribing to the channel and liking the video are all free, and they do really help me out. I'm excited to share more videos with you in the near future. I have a spooky Halloween one that's currently about half written that I'm very excited to do. I mostly did this video as a way to kind of give myself more time to write that one, and it was actually more fun than I expected. Episode titles are a surprisingly more passionate topic for me than I anticipated. So, yeah, thank you all so much for watching. I will see you in the near future. Goodbye.